Welcome, everyone, to The Nature of Mind, Navigating the Tibetan Buddhist Wisdom for Spiritual Growth with Martin Strom. Thank you for joining us all. Martin, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. And yeah, thank everyone for joining in. So I think to start us off, maybe we could just do a few moments of settling in, just to bring our minds into this space, this moment. So if you want, you can certainly close your eyes or keep them open, but just allowing your awareness, your attention to drop down from the head. So all the thinking and planning and fixing, all the concerns of this day, just releasing those for a while and just dropping our attention down into the body and see if we can connect with the breathing. Just notice the physical sensations of the breath as it flows in and out of the body. Notice that it can be quite enjoyable to just breathe. Making the breath the most important thing in the world for a few moments. Gently releasing thoughts and concerns, releasing the past, the future. And then letting go of the focus specifically on the breathing, allowing our awareness to become more broad, more open, panoramic. Just noticing the space of the mind itself. This arena of everything we ever experience. This completely mysterious field of knowing awareness. And then we can see if we can allow within that field an intention to arise, an intention for joining this session today. So exploring just what might have brought us here, what brings us to a Buddhist lecture, It might be that we're um, fed up with suffering. We're looking for some genuine happiness and peace and contentment in our lives, trying to mm, understand our own minds and work with them, transform them. But then also seeing around us um, a world on fire with so many others, so many sentient beings that are also suffering. There's so much confusion and pain. So maybe we are also nurturing this wish to be of benefit to others and help in any way we can. But all that starts in our own minds and starts with understanding and transforming the only one mind that we actually have access to, which is our own. Okay, so with that, we can bring this short initial meditation to a close. And I thought I would also uh, read the refuge prayer like last time, uh, the refuge prayer and the four immeasurables. And um, um, if we're Buddhist, then we can tag along. Otherwise, we can just listen to the words and see whatever resonates. Okay, so let's see if I can. Um, where is my sharing thingy? Oh, there we go. Share screen. All right, and I think, yeah, everyone seems to be muted, which is good if we do this together. Otherwise, it becomes a cacophony of disjoint voices over Zoom. But anyway, so I'll read the refuge prayer one time in English and then two times in Tibetan. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Sangye Shudam Soki Shognam La Jangshu Badu Dagni Kyab Suchi Dagi Jin Sogi Peso Nam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupal Sho Sangye Shudam Soki Shognam La Jangshu Badu Dagni Kyab Suchi Dagidin sogi peso nam ki drola penshir sangye druparsho. And then the four immeasurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred for those held close and distant. Okay. And then we can dive into it. So, yeah, last time we talked a little bit about I guess, the fundamental nature of consciousness, what it is according to Buddhism, how it's this non-physical phenomena, this stream of conscious experience of thoughts, emotions, and sights and sounds and mental images, and all this stuff that we experience in our mind, how it travels from lifetime to lifetime, and how it shapes everything that we experience. So I thought before I get into today's topics, so today we're going to start to talk a little bit about the actual content of the mind, what Buddhism call mental formations, or the mental states that we experience, the positive, the negatives, and how they shape our experience. But I thought before we do that, I just wanted to check and see if there are any lingering questions or concerns, reflections from last time. So I will open up and just check if anyone has any remaining questions from last week.
Just if anybody wasn't here last week, just to remind you that you can watch it online.
Yep, this is also true. Right, so I saw some head shake. Um, I will plod on.
No question. Everything's clear.
Okay, that's fantastic. I wish I could say the same, that everything is clear for me, but
Hey, like the mud that clear like the mud that the lotus grows from.
yeah, exactly. A lot of mud. So see if I can produce my a semblance of a lotus from that today. All right, so today, like I said, we're going to talk about these various states that we experience in the mind, and we are going to focus today on the negative ones, which in Buddhism are called afflictions, which are the things that create all our problems and our suffering, basically. But before we do that, I just wanted to mention that us Westerners, we have this tendency, it seems, to be rather hard on ourselves. This is something that the Asian cultures and Tibetan culture don't seem to struggle as much with. And so we tend to never feel like we're good enough. We should always do more and better and faster. And many of us experience even what you might call self-hatred, self-loathing. And certainly we have this little critical voice that's always running in our head, always telling us we should be better. And I don't know if this, maybe it's conditioned by Mr. Freud and these ideas of these innate drives at the core of our psyche that aren't very pretty, or maybe some of it is from the idea of original sin, and certainly we live in a society where that's constantly telling us that we're not good enough, and well, basically our entire society runs on that premise, because that's where our growth will come from if we just keep buying more things to cover up our inadequacies. So when we coming from that position, many of us, when we encounter some of the ideas from Buddhism, and especially when things like afflictions are pointed out to us, then we don't approach it in the most skillful way. So all these ideas, they can become just another way for us to beat ourselves up. They become just another stick to beat ourselves over the head with, another way to feel like we're not good enough, because now we're turning our attention to greed and aversion and pride and jealousy and ignorance and all the stuff that is being pointed out to us, and then we feel even worse than before. So so there are a few things that are really important to be aware of, and the first one is that according to Buddhism, the very fundamental nature of our mind, who we ultimately are in a sense, is this absolute purity, this Buddha mind, this Dharmakaya, this clear light mind is and always has been completely pure. So the garbage that torments us, the stuff in our mind that His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls the troublemakers of the mind. They are adventitious and not inherent to the nature of the mind. So our anger, greed, jealousy, malice, confusion, it it can never taint or affect this fundamental level of mind. It's kind of like a mirror where the mind is the perfectly reflecting pure mirror, and then there's a lot of grime and stuff on top that is I don't know, preventing us from seeing clearly. But all of that muck can be cleared away, and what we're left with, if we do that, is this absolute purity, which is also in the nature of, in itself, in the nature of compassion and love and wisdom. Another nice metaphor is the metaphor of of water, H2O. So water is pure, but then there can be all this pollution in it, all this muck and dirt and grime and stuff. But all of that pollution can be removed. Um, the water can be purified, and if we do that, we're left with this brilliant, clear, pure water. And our mind is exactly like that. So the point of looking into things like afflictions is to learn how to identify them, understand how they operate, and then find skillful ways of transforming them and changing them. So it's good to when I start talking about these things today, it's good to have that view in the background. And I actually this morning I was watching something on YouTube, and I came across this guy who was interviewing some monks in Dharamsala, and one of them said something that is completely relevant to today's topic. So I thought I would actually share that video. Hopefully that will work. But so it's very short, but and also I don't know who this monk is because the video didn't say. So there's this anonymous monk from Dharamsala who will share some wisdom on how he approaches this topic, and you know what how he relates to making mistakes, and how he relates to his own mind. So let's see um, if I can share that. So it would be this one. Can everyone see that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and hopefully now when I press play, you will also be able to hear it. So let's see.
Whenever we make a mistake, whether it's big or small, in Buddhism, it is that the genuine force behind is your afflicted emotion.
I think we need more volume on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. I don't think I can change that on my end, unfortunately. Were you able to hear any of it?
Subtitles.
Yeah, we can read the subtitles.
Yeah, I'll start over and yeah, read the subtitles, and then I can have a go after we watched it. So I'll start over.
Whenever whether it's big or small, in Buddhism, it teaches that the genuine force behind is your afflicted emotion. Therefore, when I ended up doing something, I would see myself as a kind of pure, but my negative emotion as a kind of enemy. And because of that, whenever I ended up doing something, I blame my negative emotion. I would remind myself, okay, I will never let this negative emotion do another mistake.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll just read what he said. So he said, whenever we make a mistake, whether it's big or small in Buddhism, it teaches that the driving force behind is our afflictive emotions. Therefore, when I end up doing something, I will see myself as kind of, pure, but my negative emotions as a kind of enemy. And because of that, whenever I end up doing something, I blame my negative emotions. I will remind myself, okay, I will never let this negative emotion do another mistake. So I don't know. does that make sense to kind of rather than blaming ourselves and thinking I'm such a bad person for doing this thing, we can see um, the emotion or the mental state that preceded this action as again, as His Holiness said, would say, the troublemaker. Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I can relate to that because one is, we somewhere along the line learn that we are not our emotions. That's not who we are. That's not what defines us. But it
Hmm.
also reaffirms that there is um no intrinsic I. So it gets at that whole emptiness again, the emptiness of the I, and that it's really the ego that where the afflictive emotions come out of. So it's kind of jam-packed in there.
Yes. Yeah, it's he got a lot into that, definitely. And yeah, I can one thing that's also as a preamble, maybe. So we have one thing is identifying more with this, like the fundamental pure level of the mind, and developing trust in the fact that that's actually the fundamental nature of our mind. And then the other thing is also exactly what you alluded to, the what you might call the empty aspect of everything that we experience. So we tend to, whatever arises in our minds, we tend to appropriate it and grab onto it as being me or mine. When the Buddha said that the very cause of all of our suffering is this tendency to label as I or me or mine things that are not, uh, and no things are. So but it's like, if you sit here and you hear a sound, then is that my sound that arose in the mind? Is it somehow mine or me? No, that's just a sound. It's just something appearing. And it's the same, if there's a thought or an emotion or a mental image that we have no control over what pops into our minds. And the problem only begins when we appropriate those things. Oh, this is my anger, or this is my sadness, or this very thought is me. Um, that's when the problem starts. So by cultivating also this ability to observe whatever comes up in the mind without appropriating it, without grabbing onto it, without identifying with it, um, that's an extremely powerful capacity to cultivate, because then we can also start to look at all these things with uh, more, yeah, more as an observer. We can bring curiosity, and it's certainly good to bring warmth and kindness and openness, and observe whatever comes up from that space, and not get carried away and pulled into all the stuff that the mind comes up with. Most of it's complete garbage, and some of it is helpful, beneficial. And when we cultivate this ability to see more clearly, uh, oh, my camera just zoomed onto me. So let me figure that out, because I think that was a bit much. Okay, there we go. That's better. Um, Completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, so if we yeah, what I just said, if we get pulled into, I don't know if my camera has some AI that that zoomed into me when I said that. Anyway, so if we can start to cultivate this ability to observe all the things that comes up in the mind without grasping to it, identifying it, reifying it, appropriating it, that's the path we want to go, because that brings clarity, and then we can skillfully we work with these things and see how how they manifest, and also limit the damage, potential damage that they can cause. Because if we act on all these ideas and impulses and emotions, then we just go around and make a mess for ourselves and others. So I'm going to go back to actually where I started last time, which is the very first verse. The very first verse of the Dhammapada, which again is one of the very earliest instances of where the teachings of the Buddha were written down. So the first two, they're sometimes called the twin verses, goes like this. Mind is the chief forerunner of all evil states. Experiences are led by and produced chiefly by the mind. If one speaks or acts with a corrupted, impure mind, suffering will follow, just like the wheel of an ox cart when the ox pulls. Mind is the chief forerunner of all good states. Experiences are led by and produced by the mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness will follow along, just like one's shadow that never departs. So the basic teachings of the Buddha is that a corrupted or impure mind, as it's the words that are used here, produces suffering, and a pure mind produces happiness. And of course, words like corrupted or impure might be difficult, but sometimes other words that are used are words like skillful or skillful or unskillful, or beneficial and harmful, often negative or positive, sometimes virtuous, non-virtuous. But the idea is simply that some mental states are helpful and some are not. And also the very experience of certain mental states are in themselves either suffering, either painful, or happiness. So they're enjoyable in themselves. But they also then cause us to act in ways that harm ourselves and harm others, or benefit ourselves and benefit others. And the technical term in Buddhism would be mental factors, sometimes volitional formations, compositional factors. And this also, a word like compositional factors speaks to the fact that they're this extremely complex conglomerate of many different things, and they arise from many different causes and conditions. So, something that we just might label anger, for example, has just levels and levels and layers to it that we can go deeper and deeper into, and analyze more and more deeply and see more and more clearly. But the important thing is that some of them harm us and some of them help us. So we want to figure out how to get less of the bad ones and more of the good ones. And I mean, we also, in a way, we already know the words for them. So we know that the positive ones, the good ones, are generosity and love, compassion, wisdom, patience, impartiality, kindness. And we also know the bad ones, like miserliness and ignorance, confusion, greed, hatred, jealousy, dissatisfaction. So, like I said, we're going to start to look at the negative ones, and we'll come to the Four Noble Truths a little later on. But the Buddha started by stating the fact that we all suffer, because it's one of the most obvious facts of being a sentient beings. There is dissatisfaction, there is suffering, there's pain, and we need to start there and figure out what is causing us that pain. So the collective term for those unskillful or non-beneficial mental states in Buddhism is klesha in Sanskrit. Maybe it's klesha in Pali as well. I'm not sure. But that word klesha it's often translated as affliction, because it's something that afflicts the mind. It's like a mental illness in a sense. But Western psychology doesn't have that concept nor that word really. So it's like a made-up Buddhist word that we're now trying to flesh out the meaning of. So the term klesha in Sanskrit it's very precise and carries a lot of meaning that we really don't have a direct word for in English. A common translation is destructive emotions in Western psychology. So I mentioned the Mind and Life Institute last time. One of the books that came out of those conversations is a book, I think it's actually called just Destructive Emotions by Daniel Goleman. But the thing is that not all afflictions or kleshas are emotions. So if you call them destructive emotions, that doesn't quite cover it. So for example, the what's called the root affliction, the most fundamental affliction of them all, which is ignorance, that's not an emotion. And there are other ones like distraction is an affliction, but that's not an emotion necessarily. Or, yeah. So there's it's tricky to find the right term in Western terminology. But I will stick with afflictions and then flesh out the meaning. So the definition for what an affliction is or an afflictive mental state is, and one of the things that I really appreciate with Buddhist psychology is that the definitions are very precise. Sometimes in Western psychology, even if you talk about emotions, you'd be hard pressed to find one agreed upon definition of what those would be. But Buddhist psychology is very clear and very precise, which is nice. So the definition of an affliction is it's a twofold definition, and the first point is that an affliction is something that disturbs the mind's peace. So afflictions disturb this natural tranquility of the mind. It's like throwing a rock into a pond and you get all these ripples. And sometimes much worse than ripples. But so they cause this mental agitation and prevents the mind from remaining calm and clear. So when the mind is afflicted, it becomes restless and clouded and unable to maintain this natural state of peace and clarity. And then the other aspect of afflictions is that they distort our perception of reality. So when afflictions arise, they always arise from ignorance or confusion. They arise from I call it a misapprehension of how things truly exist. So, for example, attachment would exaggerate the positive qualities of an object or a person or a situation. But it will not see clearly what is actually there. So it will add all these projections and hallucinations of things that doesn't really exist, and it would exaggerate the positive ones. And then aversion anger, hatred, so on, would do the opposite. So it would emphasize the negative qualities and paint onto whatever we're perceiving negative qualities that aren't necessarily there, and then grasp onto those negative qualities as being real. So so those distortions will prevent us from seeing things as they are, and that leads to unwise actions and further suffering. So that's the very definition of what an affliction is. So if you want to know whether your mind is afflicted, then you can look and see, first of all, is my mind calm, balanced, and clear, tranquil and peaceful, or is there some agitation and disturbance? That's the first one. And then the other one is, am I perceiving reality realistically, or am I adding on to reality something that's not there? Or for that matter, am I not seeing something which is clearly there, but I'm unable to perceive it? That's also a distortion of reality. And I think it's interesting to, so for example, you can, if we look at something like gender, for example, if you go back, I don't know, 100 years or so, then if anyone saw a woman, they saw someone who was not fit for higher education, for example. Maybe might have to go back slightly more than 100 years. But so, if you perceived a female, you saw someone that couldn't go to university, couldn't get higher education, which, obviously is not a realistic view of reality, but that's how everybody viewed women. It was such an innate misapprehension of a very obvious aspect of reality, but no one could see it. And then, if you look today at how different groups of people treat each other, then you see someone with a specific skin color, and then you project all sorts of weird ideas onto that person, and you're seeing things that are not present in reality, and then that triggers anger and resentment and division and so on. So it's and this is at like the grossest level, the most obvious and gross level, how we see things that aren't there, and we do not see the things that are there. But then it becomes ever more subtle if we penetrate deeper, and at the very deepest level, then again we come to this emptiness aspect, that we see something as inherently existing outside of ourselves, having this real inherent existence, and then coming towards us as if we had nothing to do with it, whereas we're actually co-creating that reality ourselves with the way we perceive the very things we're perceiving. So it goes from extremely gross down to very, very subtle, but those are the characteristics of the things that afflict the mind. So yeah, I think I will pause there for a little bit and just see if you're with me so far, and if something has come up, any questions or
question,
observations.
Martin. Yeah. I was in a class the other night, a Buddhist class, and we were talking about the self, and it came up that the sense of self accompanies us after we're born. In other words, when we're very young babies, we're lying in the crib, we see our arms and legs and we distinguish them from the outside world and we start thinking me, conceptually. And so I asked then, so this, like you said, ignorance is the most fundamental affliction. This ignorance is actually born into us. It's part of our species awareness. And and so it's like we're fighting with our mind all the time to try to to try to correct that misapprehension. It just seems like a strange thing to me. We have a mind that we're always fighting with. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to me. I struggle with figuring out trying to explain why it would be that way. We're born inherently with a tendency, more than a tendency, it's part of it's the way our mind works when we're born. It's what we fall into.
Yeah.
And so then in order to reach this other space, this clear light, purity space that exists, we have to go through all of this extreme effort, I just wonder why it's set up that way. And we can say, well, it's past karma. Well, why is past karma always tend toward this fundamental ignorance? It's part of our species. I don't really have a question. I'm just confused a bit by this.
It's a very sad state of affairs. And it's so the thing is that all karma is, whether it's negative or positive, is really based in this fundamental ignorance, this idea that we are this self at the center of our experience, and we come into this life with one way of looking at it is to see all of it as habits or habitual tendencies. So it's these it's like we programmed our minds over eons, and we're born, and then we're suffering the consequences of that that habituation or that programming. And a lot of it is it's like someone just dumped a truckload of manure at our front porch, and now they're kind of expecting us to eat it. It's that's what it's like. Where did all this garbage come from, and why? And so there are basically two approaches in Buddhism on how to deal with this, and one is to obviously transform all of these things and change these habits. And some of us are more, spontaneously compassionate when we're born. Others are a bit more, mean-spirited, and we all differ, but we all share this fundamental misapprehension of reality, and we're all clinging to this self as the most important thing in the world. So we can start and transform all these mental habits, and so we lessen our aversion and our anger and our frustration over time, and we cultivate patience and love and compassion and generosity. And then slowly we transform all these habitual tendencies, and then eventually we start chipping away at this fundamental misapprehension, the very fundamental ego grasping. And then slowly we become more and more evolved. We become bodhisattvas, and then eventually we might reach enlightenment. So that's really a valid approach. But there is also another approach in Buddhism, which is um, I don't know. Sometimes it's called um, taking the end as the path, or fruition as the path. So that approach is more about here and now, directly realizing that all of this stuff, none of it is us, none of it is mine, and this fundamental purity and this Buddha nature that is actually available already here and now, and start being able to trust that more and more and rest in that more and more, and then allowing all these habitual tendencies to what's in Buddhism called allow them to self-liberate. So if anger comes up, for example, it does that because it has all this habitual energy and all the conditions are there. But if we just allow it to be, it will come up, and then it will self-liberate, it will fade away. So cultivating this ability to not grasp onto and not identify with all these things, and just allowing them to come and go, while deepening this trust in the more fundamental nature of the mind. That's also a valid approach. And in a sense, I think we have to do both of them. You can't just do one or the other, but yeah, recognizing that, yes, we came into this life fully programmed with ego grasping, but hey, none of it is actually who we are fundamentally anyways.
Yeah, if I
Yeah.
could just add, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, is that for me, the silver lining is that ignorance is not inherent in us. And it's to remember that, and that it's not particular to our species, that it's in the animal realms, it's in all the lower realms, it's in any realm that we are reborn into, that where we take another rebirth. So it's prevalent in that way. But I just always found that what gives me peace of mind around it is that it's not inherent, and which is the hope for that it can be changed.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be changed, and it's not yours in the first place, in a sense. But yeah, that can be misunderstood as well. Yeah, see you raised hand there, Ben.
Yeah, you mentioned mental formations at the beginning of the class. Could
Yeah.
you give a definition of mental formations, and is affliction or afflictions mental formations?
Yeah, so I would have to actually look up the actual definition of mental formations. That's a really good question. I should certainly know that, but so, and sometimes they're called mental factors, and there's all these different lists and enumerations of them. So sometimes we talk about 51 mental factors, and so the thing is that some of them are negative, so they're detrimental to our well-being and they afflict the mind. Some of them are positive, so they're virtuous or beneficial, and some of them are negative. So that's basically I don't know the exact definition, but it's things that come up in the mind. Uh, a mental formation, anger would be one, for example, which would be negative. And compassion would be one which is positive. And something like attention would be a mental formation that is neutral because you can attend to either negative or positive um, things. So I don't know. I will look up the actual definition and come back to you. But does that make sense? Kind of what they
Yeah,
are?
it seems like mental formations is just about anything that the mind produces. Is
Yeah.
that too much of a generalization?
No, that's exactly it. It's stuff that comes up in the mind, and then these categorizations are ways of understanding uh, what can otherwise be a bit just a confusing mess. So we try to categorize and dissect it a bit more to understand which states of minds are actually helpful. And this is also really interesting. I heard His Holiness say at one point that one of the great tragedies is that we invite as friends into our minds things that are actually our enemies. And again, those things like you're saying an enemy about a mental state might be strong, but His Holiness is just making the point that, for example, we might see anger as something really positive because anger gives us, energy to act, and we can speak up against injustice and so on. So we actually invite anger. We think that anger is something good. So instead of seeing it as a potential troublemaker of the mind, we want more of it. Or another interesting example is greed, for example. So you've probably seen was in the movie Wall Street back in the day where I can't remember the main character's name, but he says greed is good. Because greed is, what makes everything tick.
It's
And
called
that's,
Wall Street.
yeah.
Wall Street. Michael Douglas.
Yeah. Gecko or something is the character. I don't remember. Anyways, greed is good. So we invite greed in. We see it as a friend, not as an enemy. Or just I had a conversation once with a friend who, I mentioned, I think that I strive for contentment. And he said, you can't allow yourself to be content. You have to have discontentment. Otherwise, there won't be no striving, and you won't, you won't do it, the things you need to do to get your education and then make the money and whatnot. Whereas I would argue that you can be perfectly content and then go out and get yourself an education. You might motivate yourself with doing good for others or compassion rather than, discontentment or greed or anger and so on. So but I think it's fascinating how we do not see those things as negative. We see them as things to be further invited in and cultivated and sometimes even necessary. And Western psychology would never posit that we could completely rid the mind of attachment or anger or all of these things.
Well, doesn't Western psychology think that expressing anger is a healthy thing to do,
Yeah.
which is
And
kind of upside down?
yeah. And in a sense, it's also, and this is really tricky because again, one of the traps that when we encounter Buddhist psychology as Westerners, one of the traps we fall into is now thinking, oh, I can't be angry because I'm a Buddhist now. So I'm a holy person, and anger is bad and terrible. And that's a huge mistake also. So what we want to cultivate is the ability again to, if anger arises, then anger arises. It's that in itself is not the problem. Um, but if anger comes up, the more aware of it we can be, and the more we can just allow it to. We don't want to try, because there's two extremes. One extreme is we try to suppress it, push it down, pretend it's not there. I'm a holy Buddhist now. I don't get angry. Um, so we just push it down, and then it comes out somewhere with a vengeance. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is acting on it. So anger tells us to yell or throw something or say something mean or hurt someone, or that's also not good. So we don't want to follow the advice of anger or carry out whatever anger is telling us to do. So instead, the middle ground there, so suppression is not good, acting out on anger is not good. The middle ground is awareness. Just bring as much awareness to this experience as possible. See it arise, and if you can bring curiosity, and again, like I said, warmth, just like you encounter a child that's freaking out. You have this hysterical child, and you can't lock them in the cupboard. That's like not good parenting. And you can't allow them to run around and hurt themselves and others. But you can give them space and listen to them and say, yeah, it's okay. I see that you're angry. And let's figure this out. So we can kind of have that approach towards ourselves. So because anger comes up, again, it's arising from previous habitual energies and causes and conditions, and if we feel bad for being angry, then we're just now compounding aversion with even more aversion. So this is where we need to start working really skillfully with these negative states of mind. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yes.
Well, and also what I find in my practice over the years is that developing that awareness with when emotions like that come up, and just sort of observing them and understanding what they're about and not getting attached to them, is that I actually don't react as angrily as I used to things that would trigger me. Like I've noticed that difference, that it just doesn't arise in me as much as it used to. I mean, I'm a long way from eliminating it from my mind, but I have noticed a shift, and that's what I find, even though this is hard work and most of us are not going to reach clear light minds probably in this lifetime, but we do benefit from it along the way. And
Yeah.
and life does get better in that regard. It's incremental.
There is there's I don't know if you call it a metaphor that I really like. If so it's giving the wild horses of the mind like this huge big field. So if you have this crazy wild freaking out horse, and you can either try to subdue it and force it into submission, or you can just let it out on this huge open pasture and run around, and then eventually it will run out of steam and settle down. And it's kind of like that with anger. Just give it, open up around it, allow it to just come and stay for a while and then dissipate, and it will not create any problem. But trying to force it to go away or suppress it, then that's when the problem starts.
Martin, I have
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
point to make. First of all, I agree with Danny. Acknowledging anger is healthy, encouraging it, indulging it is not, it's not
No.
beneficial. But mainly what I wanted to say is the point we were talking about before, about the fundamental affliction, which is ignorance. And I do think, or at least I have no reason yet to rule out that it is, this fundamental affliction is part of our species. And I mean it in this way. What something you said earlier, you said we have to evolve our mind. And then I thought, yes, evolution. And so what we are actually doing, possibly, I'm not sure, about all of this, but what we're actually doing is trying, by living the Dharma, is we're trying to evolve our mind, like you said. And in doing so, we are biologically evolving our species. If you think of it as even as nothing more than reducing war and the possibility that we will survive as a species. It is a process of our evolution that we are actually doing by following the Dharma, trying to.
Yeah, it's like self-directed evolution, maybe. Yeah, taking charge of our own evolution. Maybe that's what Buddhism is. Okay, so yeah, I thought we would do a meditation on afflictions, but before that, there was one final point that I wanted to make, and it's so sometimes we call those three, ignorance, attachment, and aversion, they're sometimes called the root poisons. And attachment or greed and aversion, anger, they arise out of ignorance. They arise out of this misapprehension, as I mentioned before. And I also said that attachment or greed exaggerates the positive qualities of an object. So the classical example that Venerable Rubin always makes is when you fall in love with someone and they're the most angelic, amazing, fantastic person in the world. You can see no faults with them, and you want them so much. And then a little while later, they fart in the bed, and then you start seeing their negative sides, and then starts the mind flips into aversion, and now they're this horrible, nasty person that is suddenly ruining your life, and you just can't wait to get rid of them. So this is the nature of things. That's what attachment does, and that's what aversion does. But it's really interesting to look at how that functions, because when attachment is active, so this object that we desire, not only do we exaggerate that object's positive qualities, if it's a thing or if it's a career or if it's a person, but we also think that if we get it, that in itself will make us happy. So we hanker after it, we grasp onto it, and we desperately don't want to lose it because we think that happiness comes from that very object, which makes us insanely vulnerable to suffering. It makes us complete junkies, just running from one thing to the next, hoping that we'll find some happiness by basically satisfying our senses. And then aversion does the very opposite. So it sees these objects that we don't like, a person or situation, and we think that the suffering or the discontentment or the unsatisfactoriness that we experience actually comes from this object. So we want to get rid of it. We want to destroy it. We want to, just suppress, avoid, shun, stay away from, because we think our suffering comes from this very object. And that's what dictates our entire lives. But the thing we need to realize that happiness and suffering are always states of mind. So these things that are out there, they can trigger happiness and suffering our mind. That, I mean, that's obvious. But they are not the true course or true cause of either happiness or suffering. And starting to realize that and see how much attachment deceives us and see how much aversion tricks our mind, and turning, like Lama Yeshe said, turning our gaze 180 degrees, stop being so hypnotized and fixated on all the things out there. Just turn the gaze around and look in here for the causes of our suffering and our happiness. So that is the work of any contemplative, and that's the only path to any kind of sustainable, genuine well-being or flourishing or happiness. So I just wanted to make that point of that being the function of these afflictions. They trick us. They try to entice us into not paying attention to what's actually going on, and just basically being junkies for certain experiences, for fame and for wealth and for influence and power and material possessions and all the things that we spend our lives running after. Okay, so yes, let's get to a little bit of meditation towards the end here. So see if you can find yourself a comfortable position. It's always good to sit in a way that embodies wakefulness and alertness. So it's good to have a straight back, but so that the chest can be open, and at the same time, it's also good to not be too rigid, but rather relax, and allowing your shoulders to drop and allowing hands to rest where it feels comfortable, allowing the face to relax. And then just tuning into the totality of being who you are. Noticing what's arising in this field of awareness in the space of the mind. Always moving, changing. Thoughts and emotions, mental images. And of course, tactile sensations from the body. Sometimes some pain or discomfort in the body. becoming curious about what's actually happening in your mind. And then I will encourage you to remember a situation when um, an afflictive mental state arose in your mind. So it might have been a situation where you became angry over something someone said, or maybe you felt wrongly accused. Or it could be a situation where you experienced strong jealousy or strong pride, maybe attachment, greed. Just pick one situation and then see if you can just gently bring your mind back there. Imagine the situation you were in. Imagine what was being said or what happened. And see if you can gently tap into that negative emotion. And if it becomes too strong, then you can ease back a bit, make it less vivid. And if nothing much comes up, see if you can increase the intensity of this memory and really bring yourself back there. And then as you hopefully experience some of this afflictive mental state, let's say if it's anger, see if you can really tune into your own experience of it. See, for example, how it feels in the body. Is there a tightness in the throat? Maybe increased heartbeat. Maybe you can feel it in the stomach or the shoulders or the face. Just notice how it feels to experience this afflictive emotion. And then notice if there's a story attached in the mind. Are there certain thoughts that come up, certain narrative, the story about how you were mistreated, for example, or whatever it might be. Just notice the narrative, the storyline, the thoughts that are associated with this emotion. And then notice notice the state of the mind, whether it is calm and peaceful and clear, whether it's agitated, disturbed, unbalanced. And then also see whether it's possible that you misapprehended the situation in some way. Are you really seeing an objective reality? Or did you project something onto the situation? Did you make some certain assumptions? Are you perceiving an ego, a self that was unjustly treated, a self that is separated from the other, a self that is not an interconnected part of the situation or the reality that's being perceived? Is there a me at the center of all of this? And then finally, see if you can, again, just bring your awareness back to the totality of your experience. Notice what's going on in your mind and seeing if you can create some space around all of it. See if you can move your attention from the clouds in the mind to the clear blue open sky. From all these mental formations to the very space in which they arise. This openness that has no center, no periphery. That is completely undisturbed by whatever happens in the mind. And see if you can allow yourself to rest there for a few moments. And then with that, we can bring this meditation to a close and bring our attention back to each other and the remaining minutes of this session. Okay, does I don't know, anyone want to share their experience of doing that meditation, or for that matter, bring any other question or reflection up? Yep. Fine, go ahead. You're muted.
Well, I was the affliction I had was so I had a period of insomnia last night, and so just meditating on it just got me really uncomfortable. It's like, oh, it's like I didn't want to do it because I was back in that state.
Hmm.
But then I started focusing on the breath, and the in breath. I just focused. Oh, so the backdrop was breathing in and out, and on the in breath, I was just getting purification from the Buddha realm from up above, and then on the and then on the out breath, it was transforming. So the out breath was going up, and I was transforming that negativity at the bottom, at the base chakras, up to the top. So that was really helpful. I'll use that tonight.
Hmm.
Even though
Well,
at the beginning it was very unpleasant, but I think I got a solution for it.
Hmm. So it's a lot of our problems arise from an inability to be with that which is unpleasant. So we a lot of times we try to distract ourselves, or we run away from it in different ways, and that's the start of all the addictions some people use drugs to not feel what they're feeling, and some people use relationships, and some of us, some people end up having panic attacks because they're completely unable to just stay with discomfort, and the attempts not to feel what they're feeling then spirals out of control, and it can be quite problematic. And a lot of it stems from just not being able to gently stay with discomfort, with fear, or things that we don't want them, so we don't want to feel them, and we do almost anything to not feel it. But a lot of meditation practice, a lot of Buddhist practice is having the courage to lean into those uncomfortable things in a caring, gentle, supportive manner. And I like the term leaning into, because we can always, if it's too much, we can always lean back again. But it's this willingness to have the courage to look into everything that's here and not shy away from any of it, and allowing ourselves to feel whatever we're feeling, because we're perfectly equipped to do that if we have the courage to try. Okay. Anything else before we wrap up? Thumbs up? Yeah. 2 thumbs up. Amazing. Then we'll end on that note. So just in as a way of ending, and maybe dedicating whatever positive energy came out of this session, just thinking that everyone we encounter, whether it's friends and family, people near and dear, and everyone else, including, you go out and you may meet some ants that are going about their ant days, trying to live fulfilling ant lives. Whoever you meet, they all struggle, they all suffer, and they all want to be happy. And they're completely confused, like we are, about how to go about doing that. So trying to bring clarity to our own experience, trying to cultivate the wisdom of introspection, the wisdom of contemplative practice and Dharma practice. There's nothing that could possibly be more valuable for our own well-being and our own happiness and our own evolution. And it's also the very thing that will enable us to be there for others, to be of true benefit and service to everyone else. And whatever happened today that contributes to that, amazing. And we can really release all of this into the world, and may this positive energy, this good karma propagate and benefit many, many. And I thank you for joining this session, and hopefully I will see all of you in a week. And I bid you farewell and good night. Right here it's sunny midday, but over there, I can see it's pretty dark, and you're getting ready for your evening. So I wish you a good night's sleep and a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.